are making truffle stuffed mushroom caps. Delicious. And of course, it's all clean, so everything that we make always is 100% clean. So we're going to start out with True Roots sprouted mung, and I am preparing them per the instructions on the package. However, instead of using water, I'm using bone broth. I, of course, make my own bone broth, and this is almost all gone. But this is bone broth from a turkey carcass that I did at Christmas, and that particular carcass made about 10 bottles of the most delicious bone broth I've made in a long time. So that's what this is. This is turkey bone broth. I use lots of different bone broths, but I think right now that one is my favorite. Alright, so now cut the ends off, and these go in the compost pile, of course. And I'm just going to dice up enough celery, onion, to make about a cup. So it's probably going to be about half of the onion, which is what the recipe calls for, and maybe half of these 3 stalks of celery. One of my patients taught me how to cut an onion. So you don't cut the end off. That's the important thing. What you do is cut it in half, like so. And then that makes it possible for you to slice down through the onion like so. And then all we have to do is cut like this, because it's already pre-cut going the other way, if you will. And so you have it diced up into tiny little pieces here, as you can see, which is very cool. Since this is a pretty big onion, I don't think I'm going to use the whole half. I think I'm just going to use that much. And then store the onion in my handy dandy onion storer. And pop it in the refrigerator. So now we need to clean the mushrooms. The mushrooms are very delicate, so you just want to use lukewarm water. You don't want to use real hot water. You also want to sit them on some paper towels just to let them dry. These are, of course, organic portobello mushrooms, one of my absolute favorites. My recipe calls for 4. These are really big, so I'm going to carve a little bit of the mushroom out. Woo, too hot. There we go. And so, let these sit here for a bit. It's important to get them dried out. So we're going to be taking some of the mushroom out, the cap. We're going to scoop the cap out, but we're not going to let it go to waste. We use everything in my kitchen, or at least we try to. So I'll show you what we'll do with those in just a moment. Mushroom out. As usual, of course, I am sauteing with coconut oil, and what I have in the pan right now is ground beef, a fatty cut from U.S. Wellness Meats. I prefer the fattier cuts because it has more of the, since it's 100% grass-fed beef, it has more of the conjugated linolenic acid, and that's what we're trying to get in our protein source. We're trying to get grass-fed so that it ends up having as much conjugated linolenic acid as possible. So I get mine, I source mine from U.S. Wellness Meats. There are lots of places in the country today where the beef is 100% grass-fed, and that's what you want to look for. You want to make sure that as little as possible, that the cows are getting fed as little as possible of grain, in fact no grain, and a little bit of hay that has been stored for winter use. So in some parts of the country, obviously, it's in the winter, they can't grass feed the cows all winter long, so they have to store some of the hay, and that's okay, that's acceptable to me. That's pretty natural. What we don't want is, we don't want the cows being fed any grains, especially not genetically modified grains, but just in general, we want them to eat grass as much as possible. So now it's time to put on our herbs and spices. And one of my favorites is this bourbon smoked paprika. It is absolutely delicious. So I use a fair amount of that. I also use a fine Himalayan sea salt. Really, really good. Also get that at Whole Foods. Also use a little bit of garlic salt, garlic juice, Howard's garlic juice. This stuff, I could not live without this stuff. This is the best. I know the recipe called for a capful. That probably was a bit more than a capful. But who's counting, right? And then the coup de grace. And this looks like garlic and herb, but what this really is it's salt with truffle in it. So this is my truffle salt. I just had an extra bottle. I just reused the bottle. I try not to throw anything glass away. I save everything that's glass. So this is a finely ground bulk salt with actual, real, genuine, organic truffle in it. It is, oh my goodness, to die for. Just like divine. And you don't need a whole lot of it. So now we need to mush up our meat a bit more. One of the nice things, really nice things about cooking in coconut oil is that it tenderizes the meat. As I mentioned earlier, this particular meat from U.S. Wellness Meats is a fattier cut. I get the 85%. I like it with the more fat the better. Since this particular fat is so good for you, you don't need to worry about how much fat you are getting. You want as much of it as possible because it's loaded with CLA. It doesn't store as fat in the body because it is from a grass-fed cow. So it's mostly CLA, and that means that we don't save that as fat. We just use it as energy. And then add to that, we got the coconut oil in there, which is another really good medium chain fat that we don't store as fat. And what we really end up with is just a lot of excellent protein and fat that we can use for energy. Alright, so I like to adjust my seasoning. I just tasted it. I think it could use a tiny bit more truffle, which is what I just put on. And I think it could use a tiny bit more salt. Actually, I could use a tiny bit more pepper too. A little bit more pepper. I encourage people to taste their recipes while they're cooking them. I don't know how you can cook without tasting it. You're not really going to know if it's got enough salt, in my opinion, my humble opinion, for you, unless you taste it. Okay, so now, what we need to do is we need to combine this. I'm going to turn it off so it cools down a little bit, with the mung beans. And also, and this is something that's really, really important, and this is the hulled hemp, or it's also called hemp florets, or shelled hemp. Make sure that you don't get hemp seeds, because a lot of times I send my patients to the store to get hemp, and they come back with hemp seeds, and that's not what you want. You want the shelled, hulled hemp. You can buy it in bulk, which is much cheaper, otherwise it's kind of expensive. So this is almost all protein. It is probably one of the best sources of protein that you can get, that substitutes for rice or some sort of starch. It looks like starch, it acts like starch, it tastes like starch, and it's almost all protein. So it's really, really good for you. So that's something that you want to use a lot. I don't know if you remember, but we use this in our meatloaf. It makes awesome meatloaf. I also use it in my protein bars. Awesome protein bars. So it's really, really versatile and really good for you. So what I'm going to do now while that's cooling off is grate my cheese. This is a raw, organic cheddar cheese. It just has a really nice flavor. It's not that easy to get raw cheese, so that's nice. That part is nice. And I'm going to grate about half of this bad boy. And that should be enough for 4 stuffed mushroom caps. Okay, so I took this off the stove, and I'm going to drain it into this cup. Whoa! Because it's really good stuff, and I don't want to throw it away. And so just drain a little bit in there. Just getting the rest of it out of the pan. Oh, this pan is heavy. The great thing about cooking with enameled cast iron is it's so good for you. The tricky thing about cooking with enameled cast iron is it's so heavy. Okay, in theory we are supposed to be using almost all of these mung beans. So, I think it looks like we got a lot of mung bean here. So I'm not going to use it all. I'm going to leave a little bit of it for another dish. And then we're also supposed to be using a cup of the shelled hemp. And this is 8 ounces. This is actually 2 cups, so I'm going to use half of this. Teeny bit more. There we go. Alright. So now, just going to toss this together. It smells so good. We could just like make a little meatloaf out of this thing. Now this is just simply loaded, and I do mean loaded with protein. So we've got the mung beans, which are sprouted. These are sprouted mung beans. And then we've got the hemp, the shelled hemp or the hemp florets. And then we've got our incredibly good grass-fed beef. And then we have these amazing spices. So this is just delicious. If you wanted to now, you could put some Parmesan cheese. A lot of recipes for stuffed peppers and stuffed mushroom call for Parmesan cheese. But I feel like this already has so much great protein in it that it doesn't really need it. So what's going to happen, I mentioned earlier that we aren't definitely going to use the rest of the mushroom, is that the stuff that we're taking out of the inside, I usually make mushroom soup out of. So I just saute this with a little bit of onion, probably the same spices that I used in the stuffed mushroom cap, and then I put it in the food processor, and I end up with a really delicious cream of mushroom soup. Put a little bit of milk in it, and end up with a really nice cream of mushroom soup. So we don't waste any of it. In other words, you definitely don't want to waste this because this is good stuff. Alright, so last step, I'm going to stuff the mushroom caps. I'm going to be kind of careful just because you don't want to get it all over there like I just did. Start out with 1 big tablespoon in each one, but then I'm going to stuff a lot more in here. Like so. I wish you could smell this. If you don't like truffle, you're not going to get as excited as I am right now, but the truffle is awesome. It smells good and it tastes really good. As you can see, it holds a lot. So this is definitely a meal. Alright, so these have been in for about 20 minutes. So now what we're going to do, now that they are pretty much cooked, is we're going to put our cheese right on top, like so. Then we're going to put them back in the oven, and we're going to brown them on the top, and we will be done. Like so. So what we have is a high protein, very nutritious dinner item, and I would serve this with a small tossed salad, maybe even a salad with a homemade vinaigrette. Check out my homemade vinaigrettes, if you will, on my website, which is Dr. Norton at eatingdisorderpro.com. Be sure to check that out. We have some really good vinaigrettes. We make them, of course, they're all homemade, and we use milk or cream or coconut milk. So be sure to check that out. But in any case, this is a truffle stuffed mushroom, and bon appetit, enjoy.